Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's special CMEpalooza Company Spotlight. My name is Scott Kober. I am the co-producer of CMEpalooza, and I would like to welcome you to today's program. This is sponsored by PlatformQ Health, and our program today is called Equity in Clinical Trials is Within Reach. Patient Voices in Medical Education Matter. So before I introduce the panel, just want to go over one quick housekeeping item. So as with all of our CMEpalooza sessions, you can ask questions during today's broadcast. There's a couple ways you can ask questions. You can use the CMEpalooza text line to send in a question. The number is 267-666-0CME, that's 0263. You can tweet your question to us using the CMEpalooza hashtag. If you are watching this in YouTube, and you can do that by clicking the watch on YouTube on the lower left corner on our live page, you can enter in questions within the YouTube chat function. So I'll be monitoring all these during today's session and throwing questions to our panelists as appropriate. So with that, I'd like to introduce who's with us today, and I'll allow them to kind of give a brief introduction of themselves as well. We have Sapana Pandey. Sapana is the Senior Director of Digital Education at PlatformQ Health. We have Jeannie Regnante, and Jeannie is the Chief Health Equity and Diversity Officer at Longevity Foundation. And we have Sean Feliciano. Sean is an MS patient and a clinical trial research participant. So before we start, maybe I thought you guys could kind of each give sort of a 20 to 30 second introduction of kind of your background and why you're interested in this topic today. Sapana, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, as Scott mentioned, I am Senior Director of Digital Education here at PlatformQ. I also spend a lot of time volunteering with the Alliance, where I am on the editorial board for the Almanac, which is the publication for industry news for the Almanac for the Alliance. And I also co-chair the Diversity, Equity, and Access Committee at the Alliance. So this is a topic very close and dear to me, and very excited to be here on the panel.
Okay. Jeannie, do you want to go next?
Sure. So the Longevity Foundation, believes in a world where no one should die of lung cancer, and we really believe that all the innovations need to get to all the people. And how you do that is working with others on shared goals, especially to make sure that all patients get the standard of care. And why I'm excited about this program is that many people came to the table, developed this program, including patients and caregivers, to have a discussion about what it takes to be included in clinical trials and to manage expectations the right way. Healthcare is a team sport, and nobody can make a difference alone. And I think for this program and the work that we did, we demonstrated that working together really makes a difference.
Okay, great. Sean?
So my name is Sean Feliciano. I was diagnosed with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis in about 2009. And it was quite a shock, as any chronic disease is to anyone who all of a sudden gets that diagnosis. In 2012, after a couple of years of trying to really cope with the disease and figure out how it impacted my life, I decided to hike 817 miles on the Arizona Trail to bring awareness and education to those who also suffer from MS like I do, but also awareness to people who, like me in the very beginning, knew nothing about the disease. So I'm really excited to be here today sharing my story with everyone.
So how long did it take you to hike 817 miles?
88 days.
88 days.
Yeah, we had a goal.
Great. Awesome. Okay, well, during the course of the next 35 minutes, what we're going to be doing is talking a little bit about the issues about the inclusion of the patient in medical education, how to improve diversity in our offerings, talk about diversity in clinical trials, and kind of a lot of related issues. What I'm going to do first is, Gina, I'm going to start with you. As representing here the Longevity Foundation, what are the capabilities that your organizations and organizations like yours bring to an effort that focuses on the inclusion of a more representative patient voice in medical education?
Sure. Thanks, Scott. And, so first of all, let me just say that there's nothing more important than to include extraordinary patients like Sean and caregivers in medical education programming so that healthcare professionals and other stakeholders experience really an authentic patient who reminds them of a patient that they just saw or are about to see in their clinic or waiting room. And I think we all need to do that better. We do have, as a patient organization, just like a lot of patient advocacy organizations do, have some capabilities that are notable. First off, we are pretty good at helping patients to tell their authentic story for the purpose of medical education for an audience of healthcare professionals and also for patients and caregivers, so they can learn from somebody like them or somebody who they see. We do educate and empower all patients who are living with lung cancer so they can live better. We do have a program that's running now. It's called Inhale for Life, that demonstrates that inclusion and education and representation of all people matters, and we need to continue to have them tell their story for the community that we serve. So I guess there's two main areas of success that I want to talk about. We do have a great communications and marketing department that really has a lot of experience in what I call the act of listening, respecting and letting patients tell their story. They don't steer them. We do ask patients and caregivers to tell us more about an area that we think our audience and other people might need to hear, but it's important that people tell their own story, and we have a lot of experience when engaging patients to tell their story. And I think the other area that I want to highlight that is new for us, that we have, I think, fully developed the last couple of years, which I also think is a success factor. We believe that one can't have health equity without health literacy. Now, health literacy is really giving information to individuals in a way that they can understand it. We have a strong commitment to health literacy, cultural sensitivity, and providing appropriate educational information. Process that we have that includes representative patient input, where we provide educational material for patients and their providers that creates trust and respect. And we also believe that this material needs to be given and made accessible to healthcare providers and community leaders, because there's way too much jargon in healthcare, especially for any cancer patient that is new to their diagnosis or any new chronic disease patient who's new to their diagnosis. We need to give information with no jargon so that they can embrace it and repeat it with the communities that they serve. The healthcare professionals, that is. So having everybody speak the same language that's health literate really creates trust and respect. So it doesn't go in the wrong direction.
Okay. So then how do you go about finding patients from diverse backgrounds to participate in educational activities?
So there's something that really matters to us, and that's trusted community engagement. And I know that we've all heard about community engagement loud and clear during the COVID pandemic, for example, as many communities that are at high risk were successfully reached out by trusted community leaders who worked with and were linked to healthcare systems. And we at Longevity Foundation have created a network of community outreach leaders in cancer centers across the country who have relationships with community-based organizations and faith-based organizations. And how we reach populations or communities for input or engagement is through those trusted leaders who have access to individuals where they live.
Okay. So Sapana, you know, organizations like Jeannie then have access to these diverse groups of patients. So why is it important from the perspective of the medical education provider to include a representative set of patients in these educational activities by potentially, partnering with groups like longevity?
Yeah, so I mean, the most important thing, representation matters. I know it's a bit cliche to say it, but it really is. Representation in medical education can provide validation and support for our education. Our learners, both our clinicians or patients, they need to be able to see themselves in the stories that are being told. They need to be able to identify with the patient that they're seeing on the screen or reading up on the case that they're reviewing. They really need to be able to identify with them. Additionally, having these diverse perspectives really brings in, diverse feedback and information about these patients. If we rely too much on sources that look alike, we're going to miss out on that. As an example, women present differently with heart disease than men do. Black women, for example, are given less likely to be given pain medication compared to their white counterparts. So to be able to, understand these different perspectives and learn about the different journeys that patients may have that are impacted or by their, race, their ethnicity, their country of origin, their gender identities, all of that really makes the patient as a whole. And we really need to have a diverse group of patients within our education so that we can be providing a comprehensive education to our learners.
So, Jeannie, how does your organization work with organizations like PlatformQ Health to determine, who's going to be the appropriate sort of patient for the education, and then kind of working within your database to figure out, okay, who do we have that might be an appropriate fit?
Um, Really, it depends on who our partners are and, also what part of the disease we might be focusing on. So, it's important to understand first that representation means racial and ethnic minority populations, also LGBTQ populations, immigrants, rural communities, Asian populations. So we really focus on what is our objective and what disparities do we want to address with education to tell the patient's story. So it really does depend on the objective of the program and what we would like to accomplish. And also what we often include healthcare professionals who are minority serving in our programming, and it depends on how they want to engage and who they want to engage to tell their story of success.
Okay. So Sapana, how exactly do you guys prepare patients to participate in educational activities? Once either you or your partners have identified, okay, we're going to be working with, Mr. or Mrs. X. What steps do you take to make sure that they're prepared, that they understand what is going to be required of them, and that, they are really adding as much value as they possibly can to the education itself?
So, something I like to always say, stories connect us. Stories help us see a situation from different perspectives. It can actually help shift our core beliefs. It's probably one of the most effective ways to inspire behavior change. And our patients who work with our programs are storytellers. And our role as medical education professionals is to help them in that storytelling. Storytelling is a skill. It's not very few people are naturally inclined to be great storytellers. So part of what we do is help them tell that story. One of the things we need to understand is, when we're working with patients and caregivers, they're often sharing a very intimate story. It could be a very difficult story, a difficult journey, a difficult point in their life that they're talking about. And we need to be cognizant of that. So when we're working with our patients, we really spend a lot of time listening, as Jeannie had mentioned, active listening, and pulling out that story that really has that emotional impact, the type of story that people remember once they walk away from our education, a story that resonates with them, resonates with the patients that they see, and really gives them a feel of what their patients are feeling. We spend a lot of times with our patient, and this is even before we get on screen. So we'll spend time talking with our patients, asking them stories, asking them to elaborate on certain areas that they've talked about, and really getting them to share, their personal journey. A lot of times patients come to us, they have in mind what they think the story we, as medical education professionals want to hear. But what we want to do is make sure they get to tell their story, their experience. And those stories are the most impactful stories. They really, touch listeners when they're listening. It's like watching a movie. Why do we like to go to the movie theaters and watch these incredible stories? Why do we remember them so much? And it's the same thing. We want to be able to help our patients in that storytelling process. We spend a lot of time with them before and then also on screen. So be prepared to spend a lot of time recording the patient's story, much more than what your final outcome is going to be. If you're looking for a short 3-minute conversation, you may have to record a lot more to be able to get to that 3 minutes of that very impactful story. So again, it's that active learning, listening, and really getting the patients to tell their personal story.
Okay, so now Sean, we're gonna give you a chance to tell your story. It is, as most of us know, the inclusion of racial and ethnic minorities in clinical trials is historically poor. So, as a patient who was involved in an MS clinical trial, what made you want to share your story? What is sort of your background that you bring to this?
I think my journey definitely started when I was diagnosed. So the first time I was diagnosed, because I was diagnosed twice, the first time I was really active. I just was not sick, didn't feel sick, but I had some visual impairment, went to the doctor, and they believed that I had optic neuritis, which I did have. But then what happened was that the doctor gave me some information on multiple sclerosis, which, as I mentioned, I really didn't know anything about. And so when I was diagnosed, the way I was diagnosed was I was at work and the doctor called me and left the message, "You have relapsing multiple sclerosis," on my voicemail. It wasn't the best way to learn that I had this chronic disease, especially not knowing anything about it. So I decided that I needed a second opinion. And I was living in North Carolina at the time. I went to Florida to get that because that's where part of my family was living. The Orlando area of Florida is predominantly Hispanic. And as they were going through a battery of testing, one of the tests after I was diagnosed for the second time with MS, one of the tests that I was given was to try to think of a word, let's say with the letter A. So I speak English, I speak Spanish, and I speak French. When I was going through this test, I was realizing that I was taking a lot of time thinking about a word with that letter, because I was thinking maybe in Spanish or maybe in French. I asked the doctor if I voiced my opinion, and I asked the doctor if maybe I could be, because there were plenty of people in the office that spoke Spanish, if somebody could interpret if I came up with a letter or a word in Spanish. So he kind of thought it was odd. This is now back in about 2009, September 2009. But he did acquiesce. I waited about 20, 30 minutes, went out, asked if I was going to have an interpreter. It never happened. So the second test that I had was visual pictures, and the pictures were all types of different things. So one of them, for example, I remember it now, was a yoke. So I live in a pretty urban area. I knew I had seen this because I had lived in Costa Rica and I had seen oxen and yokes and all that type of stuff, but I didn't know what the word was. But I started thinking with these two different tests. I have a college education. I'm pretty educated. I can think of some things. I can't think of other things. What happens if you take somebody that is not as educated, comes from a demographically lower area, is maybe Hispanic or African American or a person of color, Native American, who doesn't really understand, one, what the testing is about, two, they don't really maybe speak the language very well, or they come from a poor background. And as I started thinking about this really propelled me at that time to think about other people that maybe, weren't as lucky as I was. I was having a lot of trouble. So what would that mean for somebody else? And as I started thinking about that, and as I mentioned before, I did this great hike in 2012 to raise awareness. Well, part of that awareness was also about people of color and what this means to them, being somebody who just gets diagnosed and may not know all of these things that I'm experiencing. Because if I'm experiencing this, definitely somebody else is as well. And at that time, I was lucky enough to market the hike, and I was invited on CNN, Women Latina, and Fox Latina, and I spoke about these different areas of interest that I was interested in, but also that I definitely knew that they would be affecting people of color. So I decided that I wanted to be an advocate, that I wanted to be part of the solution, because and I think Jeannie said it, if we're not part of that solution, we're never going to get to solve the problem, to find cures, because as we know, different medications, different ways of research are going to affect minorities differently than they might affect somebody who's Caucasian. And so this is obviously why I'm here today, because I believe that it's important for people of color. We need to spend more time on diversity. We need to find solutions. And if we're not part of that solution, we're never going to be part of finding cures for chronic diseases like, MS or even lung cancer.
So then, Sean, what has your experience been in educational programs specifically geared towards healthcare professionals, and sort of what sorts of roles have you played, and how would you kind of describe what you thought was helpful about them, and maybe areas where you even think that they could be improved?
One of the biggest organizations or nonprofits that I am a member of on their research team is I Conquer MS. And they've, within the last few years, probably even more, 2012, 2014, we've really been trying to target more minorities. There's a council that I belong to that's called RIDE, which is research for diversity and inclusion. And again, society, the MS Society. So anything that comes up, if I am contacted, I really do try to be a voice and to encourage others, other people of color to really know that their opinion also counts. And the only way that we're going to get that is to try to encourage them to be on different research organizations or or research that's out there, because it can only help us in the long run. I do also think that since 2012, when I really started this and I really became very proactive on equity and inclusion, we've done so much work, especially the I Conquer MS, to encourage diversity and inclusion, because it's so important.
Okay, great. So we've had a few questions that come in, but I think we're going to address a lot of them in this next section. So I'm going to kind of hold on to them for a little bit. So now we're going to kind of transition to talk a little about a specific educational program that PlatformQ Health and Longevity were involved in. So as you can see here on this trial, this was called All Together Now for Lung Cancer Clinical Trials. So maybe Sapana, you can kind of explain a little bit of what this program was all about, why it was something that was deemed to be of educational value for PlatformQ Health to be involved with, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about some of the outcomes a little bit later.
Sure. So, currently clinical trials are not very diverse. They tend to recruit mostly male and white patients. If you just look at the numbers, about 39% of the US population identify as POC. But if you look at the clinical trials, it's anywhere from 2 to 16% of the clinical trial population that are people of color. So, there's a clear gap, there's a clear need that this is something that needs to be addressed. So that is why we decided to put this educational piece together. Now, this is a topic that's gotten a lot of airtime recently. The FDA actually has some guidance for industry and how to, enhance diversity within their clinical trials. Um, a lot of this came out during the COVID trials, actually, the COVID vaccines. And one of the stories I like to tell is that, when Moderna was having their clinical trials for their COVID vaccine early on, they came to realize that they had a really small percent of people of color. They actually only had 7%. Black patients, whereas the US population is about 13. So they actually kind of pivoted, they slowed down, they made this huge effort to recruit more patients of color. They reached out to experts to help them in this. And by the end, they were able to increase their numbers really dramatically. And what I want to point out is they were able to do it. These are obtainable goals. We can really make a difference. We can really make a change. These are not like, we're not trying to end world hunger. These are things that we in the medical education professional can do. So this is the reason we had undertaken this project. Now, this one is a collaboration. Obviously, it was besides PlatformQ, longevity, obviously, and then also Stand Up to Cancer, the Moffitt Cancer Center, and we also partnered with blackdoctors.org to help us market this program. It really was designed to address, these educational gaps and understanding of what clinical trials are, trying to overcome these barriers and myths regarding clinical trials, get people interested. But it was designed specifically to target African American populations, because we really wanted to increase the numbers of African Americans participating in lung cancer trials. Again, if you look at the numbers, African American men have the highest rates of lung cancer. However, they're probably very low in the clinical trial participation. So it was really important that we increase those numbers. Um, if we actually go to the next slides, I can actually show you a little bit of data that we have from this program. Now, it's not complete yet, so these are some interim data, but as you can see, this program is really very popular. We had over 18,000 engagements. People are looking for education on this topic. We were also able to collect some data, similar to how we're familiar with CME programs that we collect pre and post test data. We were able to do that with this patient program as well. And what we found out that all of our patients who responded said that after this program, they were going to have better communication with their healthcare providers about clinical trials. 70% said they were going to consider participating in a clinical trial, which is huge. I mean, that's a huge jump. We also saw increases in knowledge, so about understanding of the clinical trials, what they are, the costs, um, knowledge specific to lung cancer trials, biomarker testing, personalized treatment, what that means, and then really encouraging patients to talk to the healthcare providers about clinical trial participation. So this is, like I said, this is just a glimpse of some of the outcomes that we have. The program is not complete yet. This is just like a snapshot of where we currently are with this program.
Okay. A couple people are asking if this was a commercially supported initiative, and if so, how you went about getting funding for this.
Yeah, so this was actually, it was supported by three separate companies. It was supported by Merck, Takeda, and Pfizer, who all provided support for this education, and it was supported through grants. So we did apply for grants through to these different companies, and it is, put together like any kind of educational program.
Okay. So Jeannie, here's an interesting question that came in, and Sapana, if you want to take this as kind of geared towards both of you. So you both listened to Sean's story here about 5-10 minutes ago. What surprised you about what she told you, and what did you sort of take away from her experience?
Well, I could start. First off, Sean, you're an extraordinary person. Thank you for your advocacy. I am very bothered by healthcare professionals or the healthcare system giving Sean information that wasn't really relevant for her. It really doesn't seem like patients gave input into what might be relevant for the tools that you were given to help them to assess the stage of your disease, and so they can help you to get to the next step. So, educating people in a way that they could understand that's real for them is so important. And I think your story reinforced that. You also reinforced the power of advocacy and telling an authentic story to inspire others. I don't think anything is more important in the work that we do.
And I just wanted to add, sadly, Sean, I'm not surprised by the story you're telling. A lot of patients have gone through similar experiences. And, hopefully that's where we can come in and help and try to move the needle a little bit on changing those perceptions. I think one of the challenges in the medical education profession is that we focus a lot on the science, the medicine, talking about treatments, talking about diagnosis, talking about guidelines, dosage, and side effects. I think, we forget sometimes that behind all of that, there is a patient who has, a very personal and different experience that may not align with clinical trial data or the overall larger data. It's very personalized. And I think programs like this lung cancer program that we just did really helps bring that story out. Having the patients tell their story really helps. We're hoping will help clinicians also understand that, the different experiences that patients are going through, and hopefully they will, change their practices to align with that.
I just want to add something that also Sean's story reinforced for me, that we should in healthcare never blame the patient for them not being included, like they won't understand or it's too hard. The ecosystem, the healthcare profession, the educational approach needs to change so that that patient is asked and they say yes, and the right continuum of care happens, and there are appropriate outcomes for patient. Only then do you have true understanding. So I think there's a lot of bias in the system. There's a lot of injustice in the system. We need to come from a place of asking the patient, what they want and understanding them and give them information in a way that is respectful and shows appropriate listening. So I do feel that a lot of healthcare blames the patient on why they don't have access or why there's disparities or why they don't understand. The health educators, the system, the patient organizations need to work together to engage the patient where they are.
Okay, great. So as we're wrapping up, what I always like to do is give each of you 30 seconds. What do you want people to take away from our conversation today? Obviously our audience is people who are planning and incorporating and implementing continuing education for healthcare professionals. So what do you want our audience of listeners and learners to kind of take away from this conversation? So Sean, let me start with you.
I think the most important thing is that we have to start trusting, and that's obviously not easy. We come from a place where there have been scientific things that have been done in the past that have not been done appropriately, but we're evolving. And if we have questions, we need to ask our doctors. We need to really be proactive because it's important for them to know how we stand. And if we're not happy with that physician, we can go to somebody else. I mean, it's our healthcare, and that's really important. But I guess the main thing is that we have to get involved.
Okay, Jeannie.
I think this focus of this program was really around inclusion in clinical trials, and that the reason why people say yes to clinical trials is because they want to learn about themselves, their families, and communities. So the why behind they say yes has to do with all those things. And I think it's important that for all of us, where we're trying to get all the innovations to all the people, the future of precision medicine depends on including and asking everyone who has chronic diseases like cancer to get biomarker testing, genetic testing, and then asked to be included in the clinical trials where they might get access to those innovations. And we can do this. There are great practices among healthcare providers, cancer centers, specialty centers who are able to engage diverse populations with success. We need to let them tell their story with the patients in the room. That's what I want to reinforce around this program.
Okay, Sapana.
So, I just want to say that we can really, this is an opportunity for those in the medical education profession to really make a difference. And we can do that. We can really have an impact on patient health. And that's by including the patient voice and ensuring it is a diverse voice that is being included in our education. Medicine isn't just about the science. It isn't just about, like I said, dosages and efficacy and side effects. It's really about the patient who is taking those treatments, who is going through the journey of that, disease state. And we need to understand that. And I think as medical education professionals, we need to make sure that our learners, who are primarily clinicians, know that, understand that, and remind them of that in the education that we present to them.
All right. Well, great. Thank you. Thank you so much to the three of you for your participation, giving us a lot to think about. So one final reminder for everyone who's watching this, CMEpalooza Spring is coming up on Wednesday, April 6th. Our agenda is available online. There'll be lots more information coming out around that in the coming weeks. So with that, I'd like to thank Sapana. I'd like to thank Sean. I'd like to thank Jeannie for your participation today, and like to thank everybody who's been watching, and we will see you all soon.
Thank you.